Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is Sandra Purohit, who is the Federal Advocacy Director at Environmental Entrepreneurs. We're going to start I want to make a short comment, and we'll get right to Sandra. President Biden's transformative Build Back Better bill was already on life support, and Vladimir Putin just pulled the plug. The demise of the president's ambitious initiative is a blow to reinvigorating the American economy and preparing it to grapple with the challenges that face the United States. The president's proposal would, among many other important things, create green energy jobs to fight the ravages of global climate change. Congressional spending battles are fights between guns and butter for budgetary supremacy. Russian obstruction in Eastern Europe and Republican obstruction to the president's domestic policy programs are dealing a severe blow to our plans for the future. Our guest in this half hour is Sandra Purohit, who is the Federal Advocacy Director for Environmental Entrepreneurs. Sandra, thanks for joining us today.
Brad, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, I want to ask you a topical question before we get to the main course. Today, gasoline prices reached the average nationally of $4 per gallon. There were all sorts of demands for the United States to increase oil production, to relieve the pressure on prices. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think this is obviously a critical topic right now. We're all feeling the pain at the pump. But I think that the message I think that is most important is to realize that this is an opportunity to transition away from that pain for the long run. You know, it's $100 a barrel of gas, of oil right now, because Vladimir Putin has invaded Ukraine, and we're a part of the fallout of that, a very small part of the fallout of that. But that's what this is about. And domestic production isn't going to change that dynamic. I think that we really need to actually take our cues here from Europe's response to this. We're expecting Europe later this week to make a fairly sizable announcement about its recommitment to clean energy, and in response to the crisis in Europe. And I think that this opportunity is right before us, and we've got to take it to make the transition as well.
Okay. First of all, before we get any further, tell us about the organization you work for, Environmental Entrepreneurs.
Thanks so much. Yeah. E2, Environmental Entrepreneurs, we represent about 11,000 business leaders across the entire spectrum of the economy. So geographical spectrum, political spectrum, as well as some folks that work in clean energy and people that work in everything else you can think of. The thing that brings this group of business leaders together is the desire to advance policy that's both good for the economy and good for the environment. And clearly, the clean energy transition and the urgency of getting the clean energy transition fired up is right in line with our mission. So that's E2.
Okay, I want to talk a lot about the economic cost of climate change. But before I do that, what are the benefits? You know, a lot of people and many Republicans are always arguing we're hurting the economy by moving towards a greener and cleaner energy system. What are the economic benefits to clean energy?
Well, you know, E2 has been tracking clean energy jobs for almost a decade now. There's a great series of reports we put out every year. And one of the things that's really noticeable is that geographic diversity of benefits. So there are clean energy jobs in 99% of counties all across America. So red states, blue states, it doesn't matter. And that We know that clean energy jobs pay about 25% above the national median. Most of those jobs are, have a really pretty decent representation of union membership, which is an important piece, but also they come with health benefits and just in general have a real positive impact on our broader economy. So the clean energy economy is about 3 million workers, or it was before the crisis. And we're really hoping that it's just, in fact, the evidence suggests it's really just the beginning.
Okay, now I hate to say this, but it seems to me that Build Back Better is on life support or even worse right now. It seemed to me when President Biden gave his State of the Address last year, he talked about a smaller, less comprehensive package called Building a Better America. And I took that as a signal, rightly or wrong, or that meant the demise of Build Back Better. So let me ask you this question. What would have, and I hate to say would have, but what would have been the environmental benefits of Build Back Better program?
Well, Brad, first of all, I just want to say that while Build Back Better in name may be dead, our real sense is that negotiations are not, and that there really is still an opportunity in this space, particularly in the climate space. So I would really, perhaps later on want to come back and just speak to what's on the table and what the opportunities are. Maybe here, in addition to the meeting our climate goals, we've been told by the Secretary General that this is the last decade for us to effectively impact the outcome we have for the planet. That is also true for the economy. And so what Build Back Better had in it, and what I think the climate package still has, is an opportunity to kickstart that in a very meaningful way. So the executive branch has the opportunity and has already taken some steps to do some great stuff on climate. But it really pales in comparison to what we can accomplish with the $550 billion climate investment. And so the urgency of getting that package across the finish line hasn't demised, and we're still very much focused on having that happen.
Okay, and what would, if it's still cooking, what would specifically, how would Build Back Better address the climate crisis?
Well, thanks. So the Build Back Better package has about $320 billion in tax incentives for clean energy, and that's across all spectrums. So renewable energy, wind and solar, but also battery and storage, grid modernization, clean energy manufacturing, all of those pieces, which is and it runs those incentives over the course of 10 years. And that's a huge and significant change in terms of where we have been over the last several years in terms of tax incentives, where it's been sort of 1 or 2 year extensions, and the industry doesn't really know how long it's going to have, and manufacturers don't know how long those incentives are going to last. If we're able to pass the Build Back Better piece, what we'll get is the certainty that really is needed to spark the clean energy economy in a whole new way here. So you've got manufacturers who are like, okay, well, if there's a 10-year credit here, it now makes sense for me to retool a factory. It now makes sense for me to stand up a new factory. And so the jobs that come with that, the leveraging that comes with that from the creation of manufacturing jobs, I think will be really sizable. The other piece that it does is it starts that then again builds on our ability to be globally competitive, and I think that's another absolute win for this package.
Is there common ground now? The Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia doesn't seem to be a big fan of green energy. He represents a state that produces a lot of coal, or used to produce a lot of coal. Is there any way to find for the Biden administration and Senator Manchin to find common ground so we can get the 50 Democratic votes we need to pass this thing?
Yeah, I think there is. In fact, Joe Manchin has said there is. He's actually come out to say that the climate provisions are the main part of the overall package that he feels most comfortable with, and he sees the urgency. There was a huge clean bus company that just stood up in West Virginia. They're going to be manufacturing there and have some 250 jobs just this year, I believe.
Okay.
So I think,
Sandra, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and our guest, Sandra Purohit.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1970.
What time are we breaking again? Okay. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is Sandra Purohit, who is the Federal Advocacy Director of Environmental Entrepreneurs. Sandra, let me ask you this. How do you advance an environmental agenda? It just there seem to be so many institutional obstacles. You've got the oil companies, you've got all sorts of large groups who have tons of lobbyists and lots of money. How do you advance an environmental agenda with all the institutional obstacles facing it? Many Americans don't take this seriously enough. We go from crisis lurch to crisis and crisis. Don't look down the road at all.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things we're doing that I think have been successful, and that is really we're talking about the economic ramifications of the environment in a new way, and we're talking about the opportunities that are here in terms of climate solutions. So job opportunities, economic opportunities, and actually, some 40% of Americans were impacted by a climate disaster last year. It's fairly staggering. And so for some people, it may be, oh my goodness, there's a wildfire. And then a few months later, they go, oh gosh, there's a hurricane. But when you look at it together, you start to realize that more and more Americans are impacted. And I think telling that story, both in terms of the economics, but also in terms of the opportunities, is really important. And I think it's successful. I think it actually has the ability to play across partisan lines and to really move the needle. So I think those are the key pieces that we're leading with.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break and then get back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is Sandra Purohit, who is the Federal Advocacy Director for Environmental Entrepreneurs. Now, I know that Entrepreneurs has done a lot of research about what it costs American consumers, the dangers of climate change caused American consumers. What are some of the costs associated with climate change? Because I think it's important to talk about those, to realize that climate change is something that is hurting Americans right now, and it's not just something that's going to happen down the road.
You're so right, Brad. You're so right. And, maybe 10 years ago, if you'd asked me that question or anybody that question, it would have been about what's coming. And it's very clear that now it is about what's here, to the tune of $145 billion that was taken out of the economy last year, just from the top 20 disasters. That's to give you some context, because that's just a big
about
number.
Fire, flooding.
Exactly. Hurricanes, you name it. Crop damage. It really has affected also landslides. And to give you some context, that's about $400 million a day, which is more than we spent at the war in Afghanistan on a daily basis. So, I mean, this is significant implications. We're seeing it in rising food costs, in rising insurance, and rising housing costs, and rising vehicle costs. All of these can come back to this directly back to climate drivers. In fact, New York Times had a great piece in December that spoke to this, and it said, extreme weather is the primary driver of costs for 2021. So just it's becoming very real, very tangible to people in a new way. And I think people are standing up and beginning to really pay attention. That is what's going on now. It doesn't actually negate the fact that there is still a lot more to come. In 50 years, under cases normal, we're looking at 10 times the damage, according to Deloitte. We're looking at $4.1 billion a day. So it's certainly not slowing down, but it's already here today.
Yeah, it's very, it's just so much time. There's so much to do and so little time. Is that the main argument to make to Americans? I mean, it seems to me one of the biggest challenges here is just raise the profile of this issue. Now, I think it's higher than it was a few years ago, but it still takes time. It's still, Americans aren't quite connecting the dots yet. And unless they do, policymakers aren't. Let's talk about now. If you look at a national poll today, the top issue in the minds of Americans is inflation. And before that, of course, the concern about the pandemic dominated the issue agenda, and it's moved from that to inflation. Can you talk specifically about how climate change contributes to the prices that Americans are paying for goods and gasoline and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got examples of we had a CEO just from our own network, CEO of Tofurkey, who spoke about how he had to shut down production in his factory for multiple days because of heat. He couldn't keep his product or his workers safe because the building that he had wasn't meant for the heat wave that hit Oregon that year. But similarly, along those same lines, not just his plant, but the produce that he relies on was hit by a freeze in Texas and was hit by flooding in Pennsylvania. So that, small businesses and even medium-sized and large businesses, they can absorb some of these things happening. But when it happens across their supply chain, it means that prices go up for everybody. And so climate becomes a primary driver of literally what's in your fridge. I just want to flag, though, that what you sort of say, well, how do we bring people's attention to this issue, and how do we raise people's attention for it? And I think we have to make some of these links. And I think, if you think about going back to the Build Back Better Act, that is an inflationary bill, an anti-inflationary bill, I should say. It's a bit like ibuprofen or Advil, right? It relieves the pain, but it also reduces the swelling. And you have 17 Nobel laureates saying that it will have anti-inflationary effects. It will save people money. And we really need
President Biden mentioned that in his State of the Union address. I remember that part.
Yeah, the 17 Nobel laureates, he sure did. And that's something we need to kind of make sure that everybody is aware of, that not only is climate a driver of inflation, the solution on the table is the anecdote, right? Like we can actually help alleviate. This will save people money. The cars that they will incentivize will save people some $6,000 over the use of the car. It's not just the cost of fuel, it's the maintenance costs too. So there's just a lot of, there are two parts to this. There's the crazy costs that we're all facing, and then there's the savings and the opportunity and job creation that are on the table if we decide to make this transition in an urgent enough way.
Let me tell you what I fear about this issue. I think it's very important that we deal with it aggressively. I think it's very important that the attention of the American public is focused on this issue, because this is my fear, Sandra, and maybe you can address this, is that 5 years ago, I'm finally going to see a national poll where climate change is the #1 issue. And by then, it's going to be too late to do anything about it. I mean, I saw a news story today. I took a quick look at it. An environmental organization released a report today that the Amazon rainforest is quickly dissipating, and it's, getting less and less effective in fighting climate change every day. So my fear is by the time Americans and policymakers finally wake up to the problems here, that it's going to be too late. Are we making any progress?
Yeah, I think we are making progress. I think that, to your point, though, we have to make progress faster and we have to make progress bigger. But listen, this isn't the 1970s when we had an oil embargo. We have clean vehicles. We have renewable energy that is, commercially ready. So it's just a question of harnessing these opportunities and growing them at scale fast enough. So, in terms of progress, yes, we're facing $100 barrel of oil. We're facing $4 at the tank, at the pump, but we have the solutions that we haven't had previously. And it's really about, and you talk about polling, when you poll the American public, it's very clear that they not only do they see climate as a significant issue, but they support government's engagement and financial investment to solve the problem. In fact, they think government should be doing more. So, when these individual crises pop up, we don't want to be playing whack-a-mole. We want to be making an investment that addresses those things across the board, and we can do that. We've got to focus on the urgency of now. But I think that there are opportunities, and this can be done.
Today, I read there was a news story that the Biden administration has proposed to increase emission standards on big trucks, and that brought to mind a question. Build Back Better hasn't passed, but how much progress, if any, has Joe Biden made in progress in the 14 months he's been president fighting climate change?
Yeah, well, I don't think that it's night and day compared to the previous administration, under which we were really struggling just to avoid getting worse. We were fighting not to go backwards. This president has acknowledged climate change. He's made jobs and the economy and made that connection between jobs and the opportunity in climate change very clear. He's also got substantive national targets. He rejoined the Paris Climate Accords. He's gone to Glasgow. He made new commitments to get there. 50% reduction. He's going for 100% in 2050. So we're on a different path. He's done things through the executive branch. He's got executive orders which are trying to direct the entire federal government to cleaner procurement. And as the federal government's the biggest buyer out there, that matters. It won't be enough without something as big as Build Back Better to support it. But there's no doubt that progress has been made, and that there's definitely been a difference since the previous administration.
Sandra, thank you very much for coming to On Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I think this is an important issue. Our guest in this half hour has been Sandra Purohit, who is the Federal Advocacy Director for Environmental Entrepreneurs. I want to thank Sandra for coming on the show today. I want to thank our executive producer, Mark Grimaldi, for making sure the trains run on time. And be safe and be strong in these troubled and turbulent times. And make sure you tune in to Deadline DC live Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and tune in to Leslie Marshall tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Fred.
Thank you, Sandra.